Hey, Louise here. What better way to learn how to make triangles than with a row by row quilt that's filled with triangles of all different kinds? But they're simple. I promise you're going to love it. And you can choose to just make individual blocks that are adorable, or you can make your own little mug rugs out of different squares and triangles. I'm going to show you how to do all this. And this is just the first installment. There's going to be more to come. I have some fun projects to share today. Look at this, little mug rugs. They're going to be 7 by 10. I had some leftover squares, some little panels from a quilt a couple years ago and a few pieces of fabric. And I thought, oh, I'm going to put this to good use. Look at little mug rugs. How cute will this be? So, oh, and look, I love this for the token male, right? Not all the guys are going to want some flowery bit. That I think is a little more dignified, don't you? So we have that, but I got to get into a little Christmas. Remember I talked to you about the row by row Christmas quilt I want to do. So I started some Christmas trees with the fabric that I showed you. And oh my gosh, they're such fun. They do need trunks. So I'm going to add like a 1.5-inch strip with some tree trunks in there. And just look at how wonderful these are. Oh my gosh. Okay. And then look at these. Oh, I had so much fun. Now I have to cut these off because I'm going to, I think, make them square. I'm just trying little pieces along the way. So I'm going to be anxious to hear what you think about these. And I just love, doing the tall and skinny with the narrow trunks. And I made them long because I wasn't sure where I want to cut them. There's room at the top, and where the little trees came out short, just because that's how we make them, we add a little more fabric on top. It's wonderful. I think this is going to be fantastic. But the big thing I want to cover with you too, there were so many questions last time about the dimensions on this block. And we started with 3.5-inch squares and worked our way out. And so I just want to go ahead and break it down and show you the dimensions and a couple things about the corners in order to get everything just the way we want it. So I've been busy. I've got a lot done. I'm anxious to show you this. There's a lot of information, and I hope you stick with me because there's something at the end, and it sounded exciting at the time, and I kind of forgot. So hopefully I'll remember by the time I get to the end what I wanted to show you. All right, there we go. Let's move on. I'm ready to quilt. Do you cringe when you see a square and you want to put it on point and add some triangles and you think, oh, how do I do this and get it to be the right size and get it to be square? Well, I am going to show you the easiest non-math method, but I am going to speak a little math. So hang in there, even if you don't like it, because this will help you understand where we're going. We have to figure out these dimensions and determine what this is. And you can do it mathematically, and there's charts all over the place, but there's an easier way. So we want to get this beautiful square just like this. And we're putting a square on point. And what we're doing here is on point. You can do this with any size square, including a quilt. All you have to do is understand this basic idea. Now, we want a triangle that's going to fit across here and go beyond the edges by 3/8 of an inch on each side. And that is what's going to give us our seam allowance. Because if we put this right along this edge and we only have corner to corner coverage, when we sew our seam and we pull this up, look at that. We lose the whole everything. It's gone. We don't have a seam allowance. There's nothing there. So what we want to do is have that overhang so that when we sew this seam, we have enough here that we can have that little bit trim, and then look at how nice that is. Perfect. Exactly what we want. So what do we do? How do we figure that out? Well, we need a ruler. Technically, we need a mat with a grid and a 45-degree line, and it'll say 45. It'll also say 30. It'll also say 60, but we want 45. And you're going to take this edge right here that you want to get the dimension for, and I'm trying to line it up on 45, here it is, and put it in a square in a corner and come right up here. So we're on our 45-degree line. Now what I need is the size of that square. You see what I'm doing here? This measures 1, 2, 3, 4 inches. Now, I have to put on at least an additional ½ inch would be cutting it close. I would go to 3/4. And I'm telling you, I did try the first one with ½ inch and it just wasn't enough. If you cut this at 1, 2, 3, 4 and 3/4, you're going to have plenty of room. If you don't like dealing with the 1/4 inch on your ruler, add an inch. Just add an inch and trim it off. You'll have a little more waste, but I save all these, you know. These work good for rope wrapping. So everything has a place. Everything has a purpose. And, you know, we do what we do to make it work and make it easy and make it fun because we don't want to stress with a calculator over our quilt. I have taken a paper bag before and cut out squares and said this. Oh, and here's what I do now. I use white copy paper and I'll do a test piece and I'll sew and I'll put it together and I'll make notes and it's like, okay, this will work. So here we are. We know what size our square is. Now what we're going to do is put our block together. And this is the fun part. We're going to put 2 corners on each side. So on each side like this, and we're going to then press them outward. And you see there's our dog ears. They're a bit longer than they need to be because I oversized my square, but look how easy it's going to make trimming because I don't have to worry about having enough fabric on the edge. I know I'm going to be good. All right, so we have this. Now we're going to put 2 more on. And this is what we get. So now I'm going to trim. Now I'm going to trim this with my square ruler, but right now I'm just going to take these dog ears off. You know what though? I know what size I need it to be, so I can kind of do it here, I think. Let's see. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. So I want each side to measure 7.5, right? 2, 4, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. Yep. So this, I'm going to run this up because I need to cut a little bit off there. But here's the tricky part. I'm going to show you this up close and personal. This seam, you must have 1/4 inch. And how do you tell? You sew from the back, and you make sure when you're sewing that from here to there is going to be less than 1/4 inch. You're going to sew right there on that little spot because that's how you are going to get the exact seam allowance without losing your point. So if you see that, your point still has a little bit of breathing room there. And that's what all this is about. So don't sweat the small stuff. And if it's 7.5 and you have a little bit here and there, then go ahead and go for it. This one seems to be pretty nice and straight. And this one is looking good. And so I'm going to, move on from this point and finish. And I do want to show you. Here's a nice finished one, pressed and looking wonderful. Don't you love this fabric? I'm making mug rugs, and I can't wait to show you. But here we are. So all this to know this dimension right there, that's the crux of the situation. And now you know how to do it. We just line up the square that we want. We want this size square. So I'm going to put the edge of my block right there, right here, and then that's going to tell me exactly what I need on this side. So I'm not going to make you do any math. You can put your calculator away. Let it collect dust. That's all right. We can deal with that later. Save it for the kids or the grandkids. They won't even know what a calculator is in a few years. But we did it. And look at this, on point. Just putting a square on point and making a quilt, a 4-patch. I love it. It's just beautiful. And now you know how to do it. One other question came up about nesting seams. So we're putting 2 blocks together. We have our seams right close together, and we want the seam allowances to go in opposite directions. So I have my seam right here. This goes this way, this allowance goes that way. Now, sometimes you'll have your seam set up where you're sewing downward. You're sewing towards the seam, over the seam, and past the seam. That can push that little bit of that seam allowance can be drug over even just by a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch, and it's going to be noticeable, especially if you have contrasting colors like this. So even if it means you have to sew you have to press your seam allowance against the dark side and go to the light side, you do what you need to do initially to make this happen. You want this seam allowance to be facing the presser foot as you're sewing, because when it pushes this, that little knob, that little nudge right there will be pushed into this part right here. So as you're sewing, you want to, right with your fingers, press them, wiggle them, squeeze them, and make sure there's no gap. And if you're not sure, move your seams apart and feel the difference. You can feel that gully in there. And move it the other way, and you can feel, oh my gosh, it's so thick. It's just way too, it's like sewing leather. So you know those aren't right. So put this right on top. Look here. Line them up. Wiggle with your thumb and finger. Make sure they're very close. And I put mine exactly next to each other as much as I can. But to hold it there, I'm going to put a pin on the side of the seam I'm sewing towards. That way, as I'm sewing this way, it's going to hold that seam allowance right there. And when I get, within a 1/2 inch that pin, I pull the pin out, I'm pretty darn sure it's going to stay in the same place. So let me go sew this and I'll show you how it turns out. 2 things I want to show you. First, the seam where they joined. Fantastic. I'm really pleased with how they turned out. But there's one other thing. Can you see that 3 of these squares have been pieced together because I didn't have enough fabric? You'll see a seam here, and a seam here, and a seam here. It doesn't really stand out. It's okay to put pieces together to make up your block. Not everything has to be cut from pristine fabric. And part of that is scrappy fabric, scrappy quilts, but the other part is just quilting in general. We cut fabric apart to sew it back together. And you know what? If we do it with matching fabric, it works. So we got a little bit of this. They sort of cross over at the seam. It worked out beautifully. Now I have this dilemma. Okay, what am I going to do? And I cut a 5.5 inch square. And when I cut this in half, look at that. I've got my dog ears. Now, I really only needed to cut it at 5 1/4, but I went to 5 1/2 because I wanted to show you how you get this extra room. And that's going to become important on the next round. So this is going to put our square on point when I do this. And it'll turn this way and it'll go this way. So remember, to put a square, a 4-patch, anything focal fabric, fussy cut in the middle on point, you just put corners on each edge. And these are 3 1/2 inch, so this now measures 6 1/2 inches. And I cut a 5 1/2 inch, but I really only need 5 1/4. Okay, I think I've said that enough. I know I tend to get repetitive, and something's a little funny about this because my, let's see, 5 1/2 and 5 1/2, well, it's like a minuscule off. You know, when I put a square down, for some reason, it never really looks square, but when I measure it, it comes out real. Yeah, there we are. We're at 5 1/2. Okay, so what I'm going to do is get this out of the way, sew it from corner to corner. And I'm going to go from this corner to that corner. And now I'm going to be ready to attach this on all 4 sides. Like this and this first, and then I'll put the 2 outer sides. All right, so we've got that. 3.5 inch 4 patch equals 6.5 inch square. A 5.5 inch square, 2 of them cut on the diagonal on the bias will give us the size that we need to do the second round on our economy block. Now, one other thing, and this is, so this little business of how to figure the number was a big question in the comments on the last video, and that's why I'm redoing this, so you can get the clarity. The other question, not other question, but the other comment was, how do you know where the center is? Do you have to mark it? Well, part of the reason why I use a 4 patch is because there's my center right there. I've got a seam going in each direction. Now, I'm going to put this, and ordinarily what you would do is you would kind of, well, you would pinch the middle like this and go, okay, there's my center. Then you would pinch the middle here and say, there's my center, line them up, and hopefully you're going to be okay. And chances are you will be. But when you're just laying it, you kind of eyeball, you can be off a little. But look at this. When this is in the center and this is straight, you know you're right on your mark. So line this up right on the edge and make sure that point is right there. Same down here. So see, if I have it off too much, I don't have it even, that doesn't line up where it needs to be. Put it right on that seam line and put this straight, and it's going to be perfect. Okay, there. We covered a lot of ground here on this. I think y'all are going to be making perfectly beautiful squares in a square. So let's keep going. We'll keep doing this. We're almost there. With my first round on, I have my 4 patch on point, and I have everything trimmed down. So this is trimmed to 9 inches. And then I'm going to need a 7.25 inch square cut in half to go to the outer edges. But what I want to show you right here, it's really important that when you sew your next piece, your angle, your triangle, your bias seam on, you see that point right there. This part is going to save your points so your block always looks wonderful. And you see right here, get up as close as I can, and I've got a seam going this way and a seam going this way, so they create an X. You want to sew right here on that side of the X. Over here, you're into your finished piece. This is inside the seam allowance, and you should have enough seam allowance to take your 1/4 inch and get enough there. But I'll tell you, if you don't, just smidge it. and you can do that. You can take it just a little bit narrow. But remember, we want to line up our square with our triangles. And we're going to put this in the middle. And the easiest way here is just to corner it up right there. Okay, so we've got equidistance from here to there. So we are pretty much spot on. And then we're going to put a pin right here. So we'll take our 1/4 inch, we'll make sure we're inside that seam. And this is where it's important to give yourself plenty of room with extra fabric for trimming so that you don't have to trim this side too close. So let me go ahead and get these on, and I'll show you how that looks. You can see this is definitely scrappy. I'm pulling all the pieces together I can to make this work, and have a matching set, so the same fabrics will be in each one. With that said, I'm kind of piecemealing things, but one thing I do want to show you. On a bias seam, you'll notice when you put your piece together here and you center it and you center it up here, do you notice how these pieces tend to draw down? It's like this in the middle measures great, but then these come down and these come down. What happens when you cut a bias seam is these threads are woven this way and this way. So you're cutting across those threads at an angle, and it loosens them up because they're no longer being held in by their buddy next door, nice and straight. So they tend to kind of breathe a little and bloom out. And that's fine. We can deal with that. But we just need to know what's happening and not trim it off. Don't think that's excess fabric, because what you want to do is put a pin right in the middle, and then if it's out like this, you bring this up and you bring this up, because you don't want to trim that extra fabric off. That way you're going to lose fabric, and then this will be tight and it'll be skewed and it won't fit as perfectly as you can. Oh my gosh, we've covered a lot, but let me show you these. You see how, where's the one that I marked? There it is. So there's the one that I marked right there. And you can see there's my point. And then when I flip it over, oh, she's so pretty. Look at that. And you can, oh, this one got a little wide. And you can do that if it's easier. For example, this block should measure about 12.5 inches. And it's closer to 13 because you see I have more than a 1/4 inch seam here. If you want, you can leave that as it is and just cut a larger triangle. As the triangle I have here is for 12.5 inches. I have to trim this down for this to work. But you can come up with all kinds of solutions. Once you understand what's happening, then you're going to know how to fix it, how to adjust for it, and how to make it beautiful. Okay, let me get this finished, and then we'll get the edges on this, because I do want to show you one last thing about the strip that went around the edge, because that was a point of confusion. I don't know that many people picked it up, but y'all didn't see the way I trimmed it. I had actually oversewn the corners that I needed to. So, all right, one more, and then you're going to be able to make this in an afternoon. I have my piece all taken care of. It's pressed. I'm going to trim off this excess since I already have these triangles for the sides cut. But you see, it's almost a 1/4 inch all the way around. So this is 12.5 inches is the finished size. So my center line should be at 6 1/4 at each corner, and at each joining where the seams are, where my points come together. So I need 6 1/4 inches. And I have that all the way around, so I am just, oh, I should have used my roundabout turntable, and I forgot. And we'll just have to reach over here like this, and I'm just going to turn it this way once and twice. Okay, so if I put this corner right on the spot that I need, and everything is aligned. I've got 6 1/4 in each spot. Oh, I just love when it works so well. Let's see, this way, and 6 1/4. Yep, okay, we're there. And I always want to make sure that I have enough fabric in each corner that I'm cutting. I don't want to come up with a, I'm cutting along, but I don't have enough fabric over here. Can you see that? Where you see just the mat, and it's like, wait, maybe over here where it's brighter. Your ruler goes off beyond the fabric, and you're trimming and go, uh-oh. So just really be cautious about those things. But here we are. And now I'm going to put a side over here and a side over here, just like we have. And these, I think, were cut right at 9 inches. Yes, 9 inches, but you could take it to 9 1/4, even 9 1/2, if you feel compelled to. But this should work out just fine. And then I'm going to show you how to do those outer strips. A couple things I want to show you on this strip. And what we're going to do is line this up, and we're going to cut those corners off, because when I come in with my next strip, we're going to sew it this way. So I make sure I have enough overhang to get my 1/4 inch here, so that when I sew that strip on, I'm going to maintain that corner. I'm not going to cut it off and, get a broken beak on that goose or whatever we want to call it. Make sure I'm at a 1/4 inch there. And whoops, didn't get all the way through, like that. And so I'll do the same thing on this side. And this kind of just helps keep things clean along the way. Make sure you've got some, whoops, good angles as opposed to that, which was way crooked. Here we are. So I want to show you the other side. I did not have enough pieces, so there were 2 seams. But what I did here is this was blue and white on both sides. They fit together perfect. Look at even the little lines. So it all worked out really well. And these are red and red. So by sewing those seams there, you really don't even notice. And I love doing that. I mean, it's like, oh, I played a trick on somebody. No one's going to see that. And granted, somebody will, and maybe they'll say something, and that's fine. But I used up my scraps, and I don't have a ton of small pieces left over that I have to deal with, which is wonderful. And I enjoy doing that. And I like matching up the colors. And you'll notice I did that here on these because this seam right here, there's a little bit of red, but the leaf kind of followed through. And this one in particular, leaf here, red there, and they join up and work really well. And then this blue leaf, you know, it blends well enough that it looks really awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to probably use this for binding, but for right now I'm just going to show you how this is going to work. And let's see, let's set this up right here so we can see. So I will put this piece, where's my cut in, like that. And I'll put it here so it's going to be straight. And then I'm going to sew, and I do sew from this side because that's where the seam is on my corner. That way I can see it. So I'll turn this over and I'll sew down here and I'll get to here and then I'll, you know, kind of back stitch, lock stitch, whatever we need to do. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut this way because when I'm coming around on the other side, I'm going to need a piece that's cut. So instead of cutting off all these big angles on the corners, which is what I did last time, I'm going to cut them in line with the edge. So when I get to that point, I'm going to show you how that works. So I have this here, and my other white fabric is different, but that's okay. I have some here, and I have plenty more that I can cut, and then I have plenty of the blue, I believe, to make my binding. So we're coming along. This is looking awesome. And then I have a lot of extra strips that we're going to fill out these corners with. I only need 2, I think, on each side once I get this piece in. So let's get that going, and we'll come back and get this just about finished. Now it's time to trim off this edge right here. I've sewn it there, and I've got my corner looking pretty darn good. And I will just line this up. This way, I might be able to use a diagonal along the way somewhere. And here, I'm going to run this across. Let's see. I want to make sure I get that straight. And I saved these little guys. Someday I'm going to make a postage stamp quilt, and there'll be half square triangles in there. How awesome will that be? And then I'll just do the same right here. This is an easy one. It'll be straight across, like this. And I line it up, you know, good ways so that I know my seam is straight, that I'm cutting straight. And now I'm going to need a piece to go from here to here. And these are probably not going to be long enough on their own, but I can piece that one. And I have one more piece here. What I want to show you that I had done before that ended up being pretty wasteful, let's just use a square one, like this, is I brought this all the way out to the edge and I sewed it over and I did this. I'm going to trim this off at about 1/2 inch past that corner. So all this that I brought out was totally unnecessary. And then I went back and I cut off all these big corners of fabric. I'll still use them, but didn't need to do that. Instead, let's see, what did I figure? Oh, we can go this way. So if I put this block right here and I do my seam allowance and I give myself a little extra room up here, I have room than to trim this off, which is actually going to be trimmed off about here. So I can come up even more. I can come up about there, and I'll have plenty to trim. Now, I'll still need a piece here, but that's okay. I have some pieces I can put together and make that work. I may even just do this, and I don't know. That's a selvage, so I have to figure out how I'm going to do that. But yeah, so we'll do that here, and we'll do that over here, and then the first round is done. We'll finish up our corners, and that's exactly the same as the other one was. So I'll finish this, I'll bring it back to you, and then we'll see what's left. I think we're almost there. Thanks for hanging in. I remembered I have a pattern in progress, and it's taking more time than I thought. It's going to be wonderful, and I will have it for you soon. In the meantime, you'll notice the dimensions for the blocks are included. One is actually printed on a page. The other, I explained to you exactly what you need to cut out, and we're going to go from there. But what I'm really excited about is this row by row Christmas quilt, and we're going to have so many different blocks in here. A lot of them are going to be triangles. Others are going to be square in the square. We'll also use the economy block. We are going to do all kinds of easy triangles, because what better way to learn than to do the simple ones? And if you don't want to do the whole quilt, then you can just take the pattern and make little mug rugs like I did here. Oh my gosh, is that not adorable? And it doesn't have to be Christmas. Okay, this is everything I've got for you today. It's a lot, I know, and there's just so much more coming. I'm really excited to share this with you. Have a fantastic rest of your day and a great weekend. Until next time, happy quilting.